Some people never see it coming. Not because the revenge was fast, because it was quiet, because it looked like acceptance, because it looked like letting go. Welcome to Family Ties and Lies. Every story we tell is about the kind of reckoning that grows in the dark, that waits, and that arrives exactly when it should. Subscribe. We see what they missed. The night I understood what my son was doing. I was standing in my own hallway in my socks at midnight, holding a glass of water I had come downstairs to get. The kitchen light was on. Travis was on the phone, his voice low and careful, the particular voice of a man conducting business he did not want witnessed. Through the partly open door I caught fragments, nothing useful at first. Then 4 words came through clearly. Before she notices anything, I went back upstairs. I set the glass down without drinking from it. I lay in the dark and told myself there was a reasonable explanation. Business calls use strange language. Things sound alarming when you only hear pieces. My son had driven 4 hours to help his grieving mother. He was managing the farm, the insurance, the things Earl used to handle. And people say things on late-night calls that mean far less than they sound. I told myself all of that until the gray light came through the curtains. Then I got up and started paying attention. But before I tell you what I found, I need to take you back 31 days. To the Tuesday morning Travis arrived at this house with a rolling suitcase, a woman I had never met, and a smile I recognized from 46 years of being his mother. The smile he wore when he had already decided something and was waiting for the world to catch up. Travis Whitfield is 46 years old. He is my son. I have since learned that for 3 months before Earl died, he had been making arrangements he had not yet told me about. He arrived 11 days after we buried his father, calling from the road with warmth in his voice, and I was glad to hear it. The house had been very large and very quiet since Earl died, and I was still inside the particular fog that settles when the person who organized your daily life is suddenly gone. Grief is sadness, but it is also something more physical. It slows your thinking. You move through your own rooms as though navigating somewhere unfamiliar. Travis arrived inside that fog, deliberately. I understand now. The woman he introduced me to was named Sienna Cross, younger than I expected, composed in the manner of someone who is, beneath the surface, always calculating. She took my hand in both of hers and said she was so sorry for my loss. She looked at me when she said it, but her first sustained look moved past my shoulder toward the front porch view. 85 acres of Tennessee hill country in early October. She said nothing about it. The saying nothing was what I remembered afterward. There is a kind of attention certain people give to land. I have recognized it since. At the time, I told myself she was finding the view beautiful. I was not wrong that she found it valuable. I was only wrong about what that meant. They stayed in the guest room. Travis was helpful in the visible ways, driving me to appointments, carrying groceries, sitting across the table at dinner, asking about Earl. One evening, he came to the kitchen with a folder, new, crisp, the kind purchased for something planned in advance. "Mom," he said, in the voice he used for managing difficult conversations, "there are some practical things we need to organize for your protection. The accounts, the farm records. You shouldn't have to carry all of this right now. Not at your age. Not after everything. Not at your age. I notice those words the way you notice a stone in your shoe. Small enough to keep walking, uncomfortable enough to remember. Earl had not once in 41 years said anything to me containing the phrase, "at your age." Not once. I want you to understand who I was at that table. A woman who had managed this household's finances for 41 years. A woman whose father taught her at age 12 to read every line before signing anything, because the line you skip is always the one that matters. But Travis put his hand over mine and said, "I just want to take care of you, the way Dad would have wanted." And I was 31 days into learning how to exist without Earl. I signed a limited power of attorney over the farm accounts. Travis explained, temporary, just to keep things running. I read the first page. I did not read pages 2 or 3. My eyes would not hold the words. Travis folded the document and placed it inside his jacket pocket. 2 days later, I found something on the kitchen counter. A brochure, glossy. A photograph of a building with wide front porches and tidy flower beds. Copper Ridge Senior Living. Private rooms available. At the top, in Travis's handwriting, was my name. Not in a notes section, not in an inquiry field, in the line marked prospective resident. I read it twice. I set it back exactly where I found it and put the kettle on. I stood at the kitchen window and watched the orchard until the water boiled and for a while after. Earl's father had broken the east pasture by hand. Earl had planted every one of those apple trees. 3 generations of Whitfields had worked that land. And my son, who had not been to this farm in 4 years before the funeral, had already written my name on a form designed to move me permanently off of it. That evening, Travis talked about the harvest schedule and the barn roof. I answered him. I passed the bread. I did not mention the brochure. Neither did he. For 12 more days, I told myself it was just exploratory. A son thinking about his mother's future was not the same as a son deciding it without her. I told myself that until the night I stood in my hallway in my socks and heard those 4 words through the kitchen door. Before she notices anything, he believed I had not started noticing yet. He was wrong. But for those 12 days, I was still working very hard at not knowing what I was already beginning to understand. Before I tell you anything else, I need to tell you about Earl. Not the Earl people knew from church or the farm supply store. I need to tell you about the one who moved through the house before dawn in his work boots, trying not to wake anyone, never quite managing it, because the man walked like he was in direct conversation with the floor beneath him. 41 years I woke up to those boots. Earl Whitfield was not complicated in the ways people usually mean. What you saw was what existed. He fixed what broke. He planted what needed planting. He said what he meant, occasionally with less care than the situation called for. And he loved the people he loved with a consistency so ordinary that I did not understand for a long time how rare it was. We came to this farm when I was 27, 85 acres in Copper Hill that nobody wanted because the eastern soil was clay-heavy, the farmhouse needed a roof, and the orchard had gone untended for nearly a decade. Earl wanted it the moment he saw it. I thought he had lost his mind. That first October, He planted one apple tree at the far edge of the east pasture, where the soil was worst. I told him nothing would grow there. He told me to give it 3 years. It took 4. That tree still stands and produces more fruit than anything else in the orchard. Earl was like that about most things, patient in ways that occasionally drove me to the edge of what I had. I want to be honest about our marriage, because honoring someone means telling the truth about them. Earl was stubborn about carrying things alone. His pride about handling problems himself sometimes meant they grew larger than they needed to. There were years, when the boys were young and money was thin, when I felt invisible in ways that had nothing to do with Travis. And I was not always patient with Earl. I was not always fair. But we learned each other slowly, over decades, the way you learn a piece of land, by paying attention, by staying. The beehives came 12 years in, when Travis was 9 and Owen was 5. Earl built the hive barn on the north side of the orchard and kept a brown notebook for the bees. Which hives were thriving, which were struggling, and why. He had a theory you could predict a hard winter by watching the bees in September. After enough years, I believed him. Our sons grew up differently on this land. Owen put his hands into it and cared whether things lived or died here. Travis watched it and calculated. He left for college and came back with an impatience that farming does not reward. I remember one evening when Travis was 16. He had spent the afternoon helping Earl mend the north fence, and at supper he laid out a plan he had clearly been working on for weeks. Lease the back acreage, run the numbers a different way, turn the farm into something that produced money instead of apples. He was proud of it. I could see how badly he wanted Earl to be impressed. Earl listened to all of it, and then he said, quietly, that the land was not a problem to be solved. He did not mean it unkindly, but I watched something close in Travis's face that evening that I am not certain ever fully opened again. He had brought his father the best thing he had, and his father had not wanted it. Earl and Travis argued about that more than once. 4 years before Earl died, Travis drove up from Nashville with a loan document he wanted Earl to co-sign. The 3rd such request in 6 years. Earl read every page the way he read everything, slowly and completely, without expression. Then he set it down and said, "No, just that, no." Travis left that evening without finishing his dinner and did not call for 11 weeks. After Travis's headlights disappeared down the drive, Earl sat alone in his office for a long time. When he came out, he stood in the kitchen doorway and said something I have thought about almost every day since. He said, "Ruth Anne, if anything ever happens to me, do not sign anything until you have spoken to Owen. Not anything." I told him nothing was going to happen to him, and laughed a little at the formality of it. He did not laugh back. I forgot about those words almost immediately. We do that with warnings from the people closest to us. We file them away somewhere we cannot find again until it is too late for the finding to help. 8 months later, I reached for him in the dark, and his side of the bed was cold. On the kitchen counter, his blue coffee mug sat ready, filled the night before the way he always prepared it, waiting for a morning he did not wake up to see. He was 68 years old. He had never been sick a day that I knew of. I learned later that in the weeks before he died, Earl had called Owen and left a message. Travis borrowed Owen's phone that same week, and the message was deleted. I do not know if that was accidental. I have made a decision about which way I believe it, but I will not say it here. I also learned that Earl had an appointment scheduled with a Knoxville attorney for the Thursday after his death. The attorney who had handled the original farm deed 30 years before. Earl did not make that appointment. 11 days after the funeral, Travis arrived at my door with a rolling suitcase and a woman named Sienna Cross. And I was so glad not to be alone in this house that I did not ask why he had not mentioned her before. I did not ask why he knew so precisely which drawer held the farm account files. I did not ask why a woman I had never met walked through my kitchen with the ease of someone who had already thought carefully about what was in it. My son had come to help me. That was what I told myself. People say that to themselves more often than they should. The second document arrived 10 days after the first. The third came a week after that. I have since laid them out on the kitchen table and looked at the dates. They form a pattern so deliberate it is almost elegant. Always a weekday, always afternoon, between 2 and 4. Always after the drive back from the new doctor's office, where I had been seeing a physician Travis found for me through what he called his network. I had not asked for a new doctor. My physician of 22 years was perfectly capable. But Travis said she was too far a drive now, and he had already made the appointment, and I was too tired to argue. The new doctor was Gregory Hale, young, efficient, earnest in the way of someone still building a practice. At the end of the third visit, he wanted to adjust my prescription. The grief, he explained, was creating a cycle of poor sleep. He doubled the dosage. After that, the afternoons went strange, not dramatically. The hours between 2 and 4 became softer, slower. I still answered questions. I still held conversations. I simply did not hold them as tightly as I used to. Travis seemed to understand this about my schedule without my explaining it, the same way he understood a great many things about my daily patterns that I did not recall telling him. The documents he brought during those hours were always explained the same way. Updates to the authorization, tax paperwork, insurance forms needing my signature. He would explain each one briefly, then set the pen beside my hand. I read the first page, occasionally the second. I did not read what came after. A woman who had read every lease, every insurance renewal, every mortgage document in 41 years of marriage. And in those afternoon hours, with the new prescription in my blood, I was signing pages I had not read. Travis counted on that. I am certain of it now. Sienna moved through the house in those weeks in useful ways that I therefore did not question. She cooked sometimes. She drove me to appointments when Travis was occupied. She asked me questions during those drives about the farm and its history, and I answered the way you answer someone making conversation, without asking why they were asking. She asked once about the east pasture, whether the creek along its edge was seasonal or year-round, whether the timber on the far bank was part of the property. I said Earl had always handled those details. She nodded and changed the subject. I did not ask myself why a house guest needed to know about timber rights. I ask myself now. Sienna had also begun managing the mail, gradually enough that I could not name when it started. She collected it from the box at the end of the drive and sorted it on the counter, leaving out bills and cards from neighbors. The other pieces went somewhere I did not see. One morning I came downstairs before Sienna was up and walked out to the mailbox myself. The flag was already down. Several pieces were already gone. I was still standing at the box when Travis appeared on the porch. "Morning, Mom," he said. "You're up early. Need something?" I said I was getting the mail. He said Sienna usually handled that. I said I had been getting my own mail for 45 years. He smiled the way he smiled when he was managing something and said, "Of course." He just wanted to make sure I wasn't overextending myself. Then he came down the steps, and I held the envelopes out to show him what I had collected, and he took them from my hand before I finished looking through them, easily, as though I had offered them. I had not. I watched him walk back inside. I stayed at the mailbox a moment longer. The October air had gone cold at the edges, and the orchard was turning gold at the tips. I was not yet angry. I was not yet afraid. I was something more like confused in a way that had weight to it. The confusion that comes not from one strange event, but from a pattern you have been explaining away one piece at a time, until you realize you have been doing it for weeks. The mail was the first time I could not find an explanation that satisfied me. I thought about what Earl had said in the kitchen doorway 4 years before. Do not sign anything until you have spoken to Owen. I had not spoken to Owen in 6 weeks. Every time I mentioned calling him, Travis said Owen was swamped with work, or was processing grief in his own way, or would be in touch when he was ready. I had accepted every one of those explanations because I was tired and because I could not imagine a son lying to his mother about her other son. And I will tell you something I am not proud of. Part of me had begun to resent Owen for it. My younger boy, the one who walked like his father and loved the bees like his father, and he could not pick up a telephone for his own mother in the worst weeks of her life. I had carried Earl's casket with Travis on one side and a hired man on the other, because Owen had not come. A hard thought had been quietly forming, that when it mattered, Owen had not been there, that maybe I had been wrong about which son would stand beside me. I want you to remember that I thought this, because I was wrong about it in a way I did not yet understand. I went inside. I made coffee. I said nothing about the mail. But I thought about it. And I thought about the afternoons, and the documents, and the new prescription, and a man who had known before I told him which drawer held the farm account files. I had spent 40 years as a librarian, learning one thing above all others when the details do not add up. You do not ignore them. You do not explain them away. You go back to the source and you read more carefully than you did the first time. I was 40 years past the age of skimming. I was almost ready to go back to the source. Not quite yet, but almost. I did not sleep after the hallway. I lay in bed until 4:30, listening to the house. The kitchen light went off around 1:30. Travis and Sienna moved to their room shortly after. Everything went quiet, but I did not sleep because I kept turning those 4 words over, the way you worry at a loose thread without quite pulling it, knowing that pulling might unravel something you are not ready to see before she notices anything. At 4:15, I gave up and went downstairs. I put the kettle on. I stood at the window in the dark and watched the orchard trees separate themselves from the darkness. The east pasture beyond was still black. I thought about Sienna asking about the creek, about timber rights, about a woman who had been in this house less than 2 weeks, moving through my kitchen as though she had already decided what she thought of it. On the second shelf of the pantry, behind the preserves I had been meaning to use since last winter, was the green journal Earl had given me the second year of our marriage. He pressed it into my hands one evening after an argument about the farm accounts, one of those arguments that was really about trust and about who got to understand what. He said, "Write everything down, Ruth Anne. Numbers don't lie, but memory does." I had used it for harvest records over the years, equipment costs, seed prices, what we spent and what came back. Nothing personal, but it was the thing Earl had given me for the purpose of paying attention. And that morning I needed to pay attention. I sat at the kitchen table and I began to write. Not feelings, facts. The day Travis arrived, the day Sienna asked about the east pasture and the water rights, the day I signed the first document, the day I found the brochure. Mail. I remembered Sienna collecting that I had not seen again, the dates of my appointments with Dr. Hale, when the prescription was adjusted, what Travis had told me about Owen. When I read it back, the dates formed a shape I did not like. June Hartley knocked on the back door at 9. She had a covered dish, the way she always did when she sensed something was needed. I had known June 35 years. She had sat beside me in this kitchen the night Earl died, not talking, just present, which was the thing I had needed and the thing she had known to offer. She said what she thought without decoration. She sat across from me and looked at the open journal, then at my face. "Something's wrong," she said. Not a question. I told her about the brochure. I had not told anyone. I set the journal between us and she read through it, taking her time. When she finished, she looked up. "Honey, I saw that woman in your east pasture 3 weeks ago," she said. "The one who came with Travis? She had a measuring tape." "A measuring tape? She was walking your creek line," June said. "I thought maybe you had asked her to check something. But then I kept thinking that you would have done that yourself. So I should have called you then. I'm sorry." I told her it would not have changed what I had already signed. I asked her to stay while I looked for something. I went to the office. I checked the second drawer, the filing cabinet, the accordion folder on the top shelf. I was crouching at the bottom drawer of the cabinet when I heard footsteps in the hall. I stood and closed the drawer quietly before Travis reached the doorway. "Mom?" He looked mildly curious. "What are you doing in here?" I said I was looking for a photograph from the early years on the farm, something I thought Earl might have kept. Travis glanced around the office with the ease of someone who has already been through a room and knows what is in it. "I can help find it," he said. "I have everything pretty well organized now." I said I preferred to look through Earl's things alone. He said of course. He understood. He stood in the doorway another moment before leaving. I did not move until I heard him reach the stairs. Then I stood in the middle of that office and understood something I had been slowly arriving at for weeks. I had just invented a reason to be somewhere I had every right to be. I had hidden what I was doing, and it had not felt like a choice. It had felt like a reflex I had been building without noticing it. That was colder than anything in the missing files. My copy of the power of attorney was not in any of those drawers. Neither were the farm incorporation documents, the property deed, or the insurance policy Earl had renewed the spring before he died. I had organized this office for 41 years. I knew what belonged where. Those files were gone. I went back to the kitchen. June handed me coffee. I called Travis. He answered on the second ring. I asked where my copy of the power of attorney was. He said he had all the farm documents organized so I did not have to keep track of things, and would bring everything over whenever I wanted. Like returning a borrowed dish. Simple. No urgency. I thanked him. I set the phone down. June was watching me. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I thought about Earl's laptop on the desk in the office. The password was still saved in the browser, because Earl always said the only people who wanted to get into his computer were already in this house. I told June I was going to start at the beginning. That night, after Travis and Sienna had gone to their room, I opened the laptop. Earl's email was still logged in, exactly as he had left it. I put my hands on the keys where his hands had been. I typed his name into the search bar. Then one more word, Travis. The results came back immediately, far more than I expected, and the oldest one was dated 2 months before Earl died. Its subject line read, "I need to talk to you about my son." The first email was from Earl to a man named James Alderman, an attorney whose name I had seen once, years before, on the deed to this property. The subject line was the one I had already read. "I need to talk to you about my son." The date showed a Thursday afternoon. Earl would have been sitting at this same desk. I had probably been in the kitchen starting dinner. I read slowly, short, the way Earl wrote everything. He believed in specifics. The email said he was concerned about conversations with his son Travis regarding the family property, that Travis had been asking about valuations, the terms of the will, what would happen to the farm if something happened to him, that he had refused a business loan for the 4th time in 6 years, a decision he did not regret, but which had clarified something. The most recent request had come with independent property valuations Travis had commissioned before asking Earl to sign. "I do not know who prepared them," Earl wrote. "I only know Travis had them ready before he asked. I believe I know what that means." He wanted to discuss options for protecting the property before he ran out of time to do it. Protecting the property, I sat back in Earl's chair. He had known, not every detail, but the shape of it. He had watched his son commission property valuations in secret and had recognized immediately what kind of watching that was. And he had quietly, without telling me, started doing something about it. Mr. Alderman had replied, suggesting several instruments, including conservation arrangements. Earl had driven to Knoxville for a meeting and come home and helped me put up the season's preserves, and we had made soup for dinner, and I had not asked where he had been because I had trusted him to tell me what I needed to know. The thread continued over several months. Brief practical exchanges. He was building something without naming it until it was ready to name. I was halfway through reading when I heard a sound on the stairs. I closed the laptop and moved to the doorway in the same motion. By the time I reached the hall, I had the posture of someone who had simply come downstairs for water. I stepped back into the office shadow and pressed against the wall. Sienna came into the kitchen. She did not turn on the light. She moved to the counter, poured a glass of water, and then I heard something I had not expected at all. She dialed a number. At 2:30 in the morning, Sienna Cross stood in my kitchen in the dark and made a phone call. Not sleeplessness, not thirst, a scheduled call. The kind you make at a particular hour because you do not want certain conversations to happen during daylight. Her voice was low. I caught fragments through the doorway. She was in the office. I saw the light under the door. A pause. Something from the other end I could not hear. I don't know what she found, but we need to move faster. If the paperwork is in front of the developer by Friday, it won't matter what she's been looking at. Travis has the authorization. It should be enough. Another exchange. Then simply, I'll handle it. The call ended. She set the glass down. She went back upstairs. I did not move until I had counted to 60. Then I went back to the desk and opened the laptop with hands that were steadier than they should have been. I was past the stage where I could afford to shake. I was moving into somewhere cooler and more useful. Sienna knew I had been in this office. She had seen the light, and she and Travis had a deadline I had not known about. Friday. I read the rest of the thread quickly now. The final email from Earl to Alderman was sent 9 days before he died. James, I believe we have everything we need on our end. I would like to sign the final instrument before the end of the month. Can we schedule for next Thursday? He had not made that appointment. 9 days. Then his heart stopped, and Travis arrived 11 days later with Sienna Cross, who had just been standing in my kitchen at 2:30 in the morning, confirming their timeline was still intact. Then I scrolled down. Below Earl's last email was a reply addressed not to Earl, but to me. From Mr. Alderman, sent 3 weeks after Earl died. Mrs. Whitfield. I was deeply sorry to learn of Earl's passing. He was a man of great integrity. I want you to know that the instrument he signed was recorded with the county on the 3rd of October, 1 week before he passed. It is properly in place. When you are ready, please call my office. There are things you should understand about what Earl arranged for you. When you are ready, he had known. Earl had arranged for this message to be waiting. However long it took me to find it, he had built the shield and finished it in time. He had loved me by building systems the way he built everything else on this farm, quietly and without announcement, trusting that I would find what he left behind when I needed it. The recognition of that was almost more than I could hold at 2 in the morning. But Sienna had her own clock, and her clock said Friday. I opened the drafts folder. 1 unsent email. Recipient field, blank. Subject line, Ruth Anne. 3 sentences. I read them once, then again. Then I sat for a long time without moving, because some things require the dark before they can be properly held. And because I now knew 2 things that mattered equally. Earl had protected me, and Sienna Cross had just told someone on the phone that in 4 days it would not matter. I had 4 days. I intended to use every one of them. The email had no date. Earl had never sent it. And so it existed in the particular nowhere of things begun but not finished. Subject, Ruth Anne. I read the 4 sentences. Earl had called them 3. He was never precise about counting. I have been trying to write this for 3 weeks, and I cannot find the right words, which tells me I should just use the plain ones. You are the sharpest person in any room you have ever walked into, and I am sorry I let anyone, including myself sometimes, make you forget that. Whatever Travis is doing or has done, you will figure it out. You always could. What I kept returning to was the phrase, including myself sometimes. I thought about a Sunday dinner years ago, when our neighbor Bill Oates said something about agricultural tax credits that was simply wrong. I knew because I had just filed our returns. I said so, politely, with specifics. Bill laughed and looked at Earl, the way men looked at Earl when they wanted the real authority to weigh in. Earl smiled and changed the subject. He did not say Ruth is right. He did not say she handles our accounts. Reading the letter in the dark, I understood Earl had been thinking about those evenings too. That including myself sometimes was the most precise phrase in it. He had known what he had done. And at the very end, with time almost gone, he had written it down in a draft he never sent. I closed the laptop and went back to bed and did not sleep. In the morning, Travis came downstairs before Sienna. He poured coffee and stood at the counter with the energy of a man who has something prepared. "Mom," he said, "I've arranged for someone to come by Wednesday, an attorney from Nashville who handles estate matters. I'd like you to sit down with him, just to get a clearer picture of where things stand with the farm." He said it the way he said everything now, reasonably, helpfully, with the cadence of someone who has rehearsed until the words sound unrehearsed. "His name is Mr. Pryor. He's been very helpful to me in understanding the options. I think you'd find the conversation reassuring." I said I had plans Wednesday. A pause, small and precise. "What kind of plans?" I said I was going to June's to help put her garden to bed before the ground froze. Travis looked at me a moment, deciding whether he believed it. Then it passed. "Maybe another day," he said. "It's not urgent." But it was. The word urgent was communicating something specific by its absence. Sienna came down while we were eating. She sat with the composed unhurriedness of someone who had slept well and had a clear plan for the day. She did not look at me when I looked at her. Travis said, while Sienna was there, "The developer's attorney confirmed this week. Everything on their end is ready. Once the legal structure is in place on our side, it happens quickly." He was looking out at the farm. "It's a real opportunity, Mom, for everyone." I asked if he wanted more eggs. He said, "No, thank you." I passed Sienna the salt. Nobody said anything else about attorneys or timelines or opportunities. I made a decision sometime between breakfast and noon. I was not going to tell Travis I had spoken to Mr. Alderman. I was not going to tell him about Thursday. I was going to keep performing exactly what I had been performing, and I was going to be very good at it, because I had been underestimated by men my entire life, and I was finished allowing it to be a disadvantage. That afternoon, I walked across the field to June's house. She opened the door before I knocked. I used her phone. The first call was to Owen. He answered on the first ring, his voice so immediately present that I had to hold the phone away from my face for a moment, because the sound of it made something in my chest give way that I had been holding very carefully for a very long time. "Mom," his voice cracked on the single word. "I have been calling Travis for weeks. He kept telling me you needed space, that you specifically asked not to hear from anyone, that hearing voices from before made it worse. I wanted to come for the funeral. He told me you had asked him to keep it small, just family. He said you could not manage more than that." I stood in June's kitchen and felt the floor of the last 6 weeks shift under me, because here is what I had believed. I had believed Owen stayed away. I had believed my younger son could not be bothered to call in the worst weeks of my life. I had carried his father's casket with a hired man on one side because Owen had not come. And I had let myself grow quietly bitter about it, and every part of it was wrong. Owen had been calling. Owen had wanted to come. Owen had been turned away at every door by the same person sitting in my kitchen explaining documents to me in the soft afternoon hours. It was not Owen who had abandoned me. The son I had been quietly resenting was the one who had been trying to reach me. And the son I had been trusting was the one making sure he could not. I had to put my hand on June's counter. "Mom," Owen said, "are you there?" I said I was. I said I knew now what Travis had told him, and that none of it was true, and that I was sorry I had not found a way to call sooner. "How long has this been going on?" I said, "Long enough." I told him I needed him to come home. Soon. A silence. Then, "I'm already packed," he said. "I've been packed for 3 weeks." I stood at June's kitchen window a moment after we hung up. Outside, the last of October was burning off in the trees, gold going to brown. 4 days until Friday, 3 days until the alderman meeting, 2 days until Owen arrived. I had been alone in this for a long time. I was not going to be alone much longer. That, I was beginning to understand, was its own kind of advantage. Owen arrived at 7:30 the next morning. I was on the porch with my coffee when his truck turned into the driveway, and even at that distance, in that flat, early light, I had to grip the railing. He walked like Earl. He always had. I had forgotten how much until that moment. He came up the steps, and we held each other for a while without speaking. He was 42 years old, and he felt like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had finally been told he could set it down. When we stepped back, he looked at my face the way Earl used to look at it, directly, without glancing away when it was uncomfortable. "I should have called anyway," he said, regardless of what Travis told me. I told him he was here now. That was what mattered. We sat on the porch for 20 minutes before going inside. We talked about the drive from Portland, the cold front coming in, the beehives. Owen had always been drawn to the bees the way Earl was. He asked if the hives had been winterized yet. I said not quite. He nodded, and we drank our coffee. And the farm was quiet around us, the way it was only in the early morning. And I think we both needed that before we could talk about the rest. Then I brought him inside and showed him everything. I showed him the green journal with the dates. I showed him the brochure. Owen picked it up and read the prospective resident line twice. Then he set it down very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands need to stop holding it, or you will do something that cannot be undone. He did not look at me for a moment. When he did, his eyes were wet. "She never asked for this," he said. "Not quite to me, to the room, to some accounting he was doing somewhere inside himself." I said that was correct. She had not. He said, "Tell me about the power of attorney." I told him everything. The documents I had signed and those I could not find. Dr. Hale and the adjusted prescription, and the pattern of signing afternoons. June and the measuring tape. Mr. Alderman's email that had been waiting for me, properly filed since the 3rd of October. When I finished, Owen was quiet for a moment, in the way he was always quiet when he was running something through an internal process that he trusted more than words. Then he said something that rearranged several things I thought I understood. Travis called me 2 weeks ago, Owen said. He told me the farm situation was nearly resolved and wanted to know if I would support the decision. He used that phrase, the decision, like it had already been made. I asked what decision he meant. He said it was best for the family, that you were struggling more than you let on, and that a different living arrangement would give you more support and care. Owen paused. I told him I needed to speak to you directly before I had any opinion about anything. He said you had asked for space, that you weren't ready to hear from people. He looked toward the window. The orchard was visible through the glass, the same trees we had both climbed as children. 3 weeks, he said. I kept telling myself I was waiting for the right moment. I think the truth is, I was waiting to find out I was wrong about what I was thinking. He looked back at me. I am not wrong, am I? It was not a question. I said he was not wrong. Travis came home at 4:30, earlier than expected. I heard his truck before I heard the door, which gave me enough time to close the green journal and move it to the shelf beside the cookbooks, where it looked as though it had always lived. Travis stepped into the kitchen and found his brother at the table. Something moved across his face quickly enough that most people would have missed it. It was not quite surprise. It was more like the particular stillness of a man who has just recalculated. Owen, he said, you didn't mention you were coming. Owen said he had not known until recently. Travis poured himself a glass of water. He asked about the drive, about Portland, about whether Owen was staying a few days. He smiled with the ease of someone who has practiced appearing easy. Owen answered in the pleasant, unrevealing way of someone gathering information. I made dinner. We ate together, the 3 of us, and it was in some ways the most demanding performance I had ever participated in. Near the end, Travis mentioned almost casually that things on the property side were moving toward a conclusion. He was looking at Owen when he said it, not at me, and I understood the precision of what he was doing, announcing to his brother that a decision was in progress, so that when it arrived, Owen could not honestly say he had not been told. He said it was all very positive. He said the word positive twice. Owen said that sounded interesting and asked what kind of conclusion he had in mind. Travis said he would explain everything properly once things were further along. After Travis went upstairs, Owen and I sat at the kitchen table for a long time without speaking. He said, he is going to move on this fast. I said, I knew. He said, Thursday is the alderman meeting. I said, I knew that too. Then he reached into his jacket and set his old phone on the table between us, the one he had replaced 2 years ago and kept in a drawer because some objects accumulate a weight that makes discarding them feel dishonest. I found something last night before I drove down. I went through the cloud backup from this phone. He set it flat on the table between us. Dad left a voicemail the day before he died. The kitchen was very still. I have not listened to it yet, Owen said. I thought you should be there the first time. Owen pressed play. The kitchen was completely still. Outside the window, the farm was dark, nothing visible except the faint outline of the orchard against a sky with too much cloud for stars. Then Earl's voice came through the small speaker, and I put my hand flat on the table to keep it from shaking. Owen, it's Dad. A pause. The particular quality of the pause was exactly Earl, not dramatic, just the sound of a man who says what he means and is finding the words. I need to talk to you about Travis and the farm, not on the phone. Come down when you can. Soon, if you're able. There are some things your mother doesn't know yet, and I've been trying to handle them without worrying her, which was probably a mistake. Another pause. Just come, and don't tell Travis you're coming. That's important, son. Don't tell Travis. The message ended. Owen set the phone down. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. He had been trying to protect me from having to worry. That was the phrase in my mind. He had been trying to protect me. Then something else came in underneath that. Quiet but unmistakable. The way cold water comes in under a door. He should have told me, I said. Owen looked at me. He should have told me directly, I said. Not Owen. Not a voicemail to someone else. He should have sat across the kitchen table and told me what he knew about Travis, and let me decide for myself what to do with it. Owen said, I know. He thought he was protecting me. I know he did. That is the problem, I said. That is the same thing Travis is doing right now. Managing what I know, deciding what I am capable of handling. Your father was a better man than Travis in every way that matters, but he made the same mistake, and it cost me 18 months. Owen was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Are you angry at him? I thought about that. The word angry did not quite cover it. Anger was clean. What I felt was closer to the particular sorrow of realizing that someone who loved you spent a great deal of effort trying to spare you from something you would have been able to handle. Yes, I said, a little. I think that is allowed. Owen said he thought it was too... We sat with that for a while. The voicemail was still visible on the phone screen, the timestamp showing the day before Earl's heart stopped. He had been sitting somewhere with that phone, in his truck perhaps, or in the hive barn, among the bees he trusted more than most people, and he had been worried enough to call Owen. He had known something was coming. He had been building protection against it for months, and he had not said a single word of it to me. I folded that knowledge up and put it somewhere I would return to when I had more time for it. We had things to do. I told Owen about the alderman meeting Thursday morning. 9 o'clock, Gay Street in Knoxville. Owen said he would drive. We spent an hour at the kitchen table going through everything I had documented in the Green Journal, comparing it to what Travis had told Owen about the decision and the timeline and the arrangements. When we laid it all next to each other, the shape was very clear. Travis had been working on this for the better part of a year, possibly longer. Just before midnight, there was a knock at the kitchen door frame. Travis stood there in the dim light of the hall, in the clothes he had gone upstairs in, as though he had come down for water and simply noticed the light under the door. You two are still up? He said. Not quite a question. Owen said we had been catching up. A lot to talk about. Travis looked at the table. The Green Journal was closed. The phone was in Owen's jacket pocket. Nothing visible. His eyes moved over the room with the same quick, professional sweep I had seen when he first arrived at this farm 11 months ago. Don't stay up too late, he said. Big day tomorrow. He smiled. Early morning for me. I asked what he had on. He said he had a meeting in Knoxville. Developer representative. Just finalizing some early details. He would be on the road by 8. I said that sounded like a full day. He said it was all moving along nicely. Then he said good night and went back upstairs. Owen and I looked at each other across the table. He said, very quietly, "He's watching us." I said I had noticed. We listened to the house settle until we were sure he was back in the room at the top of the stairs. Then Owen leaned forward and spoke in the low voice he used when he was being precise. "His meeting is in Knoxville Thursday morning," Owen said. "Our meeting is in Knoxville Thursday morning." I nodded. "He can't know we're going to Alderman," Owen said. "If he figures it out before we get there, he will find a way to complicate it." I said I understood. "So we leave early," Owen said, "before he's on the road. We do not tell him where we're going." I thought about that for a moment, about what it meant to be planning a covert drive to Knoxville in order to meet with a lawyer about my own property, in my own name, in a meeting my own husband had arranged for me. Then I picked up the green journal and wrote down the time, 9 o'clock Thursday, Gay Street, Alderman. Beneath it I wrote, in Earl's handwriting style, the way he always ended his notes, "Do not be late." I had not planned to do that, but it felt right. They left at 10 minutes before 7. Owen drove. Travis's truck had been in the drive when they came downstairs, and they moved quietly out before any light showed under the door at the top of the stairs. The farm disappeared behind them in the early gray, and Ruth did not look back. The drive took 45 minutes. Ruth watched the Blue Ridge come up as the sun cleared it. She thought about Earl driving this route in September, carrying the thing he was going to do and not telling her. Mr. James Alderman was older than Ruth had imagined, 70s at least, with the deliberate movements of a man who had learned that careful was more efficient than fast. He had coffee ready. He shook Ruth's hand and held it a moment. "Earl spoke of you often. He was very proud." She thanked him and sat down. Mr. Alderman did not open the file immediately. "Before we begin, you should know that Travis's attorney called this office Tuesday morning asking about recorded estate documents associated with your husband. I declined to discuss anything without you present." He paused. "He knows you've been in contact with me." Ruth looked at Owen. Travis had found the email thread on Earl's laptop. He had known since Thursday evening. Mr. Alderman slid the conservation easement across the desk. 12 pages, recorded and stamped by Knox County on the 3rd of October. The eastern 40 acres were restricted in perpetuity, no development, no commercial use, no sale without Ruth's explicit, written, notarized consent. Without those 40 acres, the resort development was not viable. Ruth asked whether Travis could challenge it. Mr. Alderman said a challenge would likely fail. Then he said something unexpected. His attorney has already filed a preliminary inquiry with the Conservation Trust, requesting documentation of Earl's mental state at the time of signing. He set his glasses on the desk. A recognized tactic. They cannot win it easily, but they can use it to create delay. A cloud over the easement while the inquiry is unresolved. Owen said, "How long could that take?" Mr. Alderman said, 6 to 18 months if challenged aggressively. Ruth understood. The easement was real, probably unbreakable in the end. But Travis was not trying to break it cleanly. He was trying to slow it long enough for the transaction to close under the assumption it would resolve in his favor. By then the money would have changed hands and the farm would be gone, and she would spend years fighting to undo a completed sale instead of preventing one. She had been wrong to feel safe reading Alderman's email the night before. The shield was real. But a shield requires someone behind it who is paying attention. Then Mr. Alderman said the thing she did not want to hear, because the challenge named Earl directly. Defending the easement would require testimony about his final months, his memory, his judgment. He said it gently, but did not soften it. We will likely need to put on record a detailed account of your husband's mental state in the weeks before he died. Every ordinary lapse any man of 68 has in a month, examined and argued over by attorneys who did not know him. Ruth sat with that. It was one thing to defend Earl. It was another to spend months cataloging her husband's smallest failings in front of strangers, turning 41 years of marriage into evidence, reducing the man to a question of whether he had been competent. Earl, who had hated few things more than being discussed. She would have to do it anyway. There was no version of keeping the farm that did not run through it. Protecting Earl's wishes would require exposing him in a way he never would have chosen, and she said only that she understood. She asked about the western acreage. Mr. Alderman's expression shifted. The power of attorney covers operating accounts, not real property generally. But if Travis restructures the offer to address only the western 45 acres, arguing the eastern restriction does not apply, his attorney may have a basis to proceed. The western land is less valuable without the creek corridor, but not worthless, Owen said quietly. He could split the deal. Ruth asked what she could do. Mr. Alderman gave them two names, attorneys who handled elder financial exploitation and unauthorized use of identity in financial instruments. The forensic evidence already gathered would all be relevant. Before they left, he said, Earl was not trying to make this impossible for Travis. He was trying to make it impossible for Travis to do it without you. That is still true. The question now is how hard and how long he is willing to fight. They walked to the truck in the October morning. Owen said, He's going to fight. Ruth said she knew. They drove home through the mountains without speaking much. 6 to 18 months sat between them in the cab, like a number that changes the size of a room. Travis had filed before they ever walked into Alderman's office, naming his own mother as a witness against her husband's final wishes. But Earl had wanted to make it impossible without her. That was still true. When Ruth opened the back door, she smelled something cooking. Travis was at the stove. He turned and smiled and asked how her errands had gone. Fine, she said. She had spent some time with June. That night, after going upstairs to change, Ruth stopped in the doorway of Earl's office. She had locked the laptop in the bottom drawer that morning and checked it twice. The drawer was closed. The laptop was on the desk, open, screen dark. Beside it, printed and folded once, was a document she had not left there. She unfolded it. At the top was a court case heading, and in the case description field, a phrase she read 3 times. In the matter of the mental competency of Earl Thomas Whitfield at the time of the conservation easement execution, filing party, Travis Allen Whitfield. Material witness listed, Ruth Anne Whitfield. He had left it for her to find. He wanted her to know he had filed and to understand exactly what kind of witness he expected her to be. Travis was already in the kitchen when Ruth came downstairs Friday morning. He had made coffee. He had set out 3 cups. That was the first sign. Travis never made coffee. For 11 months, he had come downstairs and poured from whatever Ruth had already brewed. The 3 cups on the counter, arranged with a kind of deliberate thoughtfulness, were a performance Ruth recognized immediately because she had been performing herself for weeks, and she knew what it looked like from the outside. He was managing her again. But now he knew she knew, and so the management had changed shape. It was more careful, more considerate, more dangerous. "Morning, Mom," he said. "Sleep okay?" She said she had slept fine. Owen came down 10 minutes later, and the three of them sat at the table together. Travis was in an expansive mood, interested in everything, asking Owen about his work in Portland, laughing easily. He had the energy of a man who had spent a significant portion of the night thinking through his options and had arrived at a strategy. After Owen went out to check on the hive barn, Travis set his coffee cup down and looked at Ruth. "I think I owe you an explanation," he said. Ruth waited. "I should have talked to you sooner about what I was trying to do with the farm." His voice was measured, careful, the voice he used when he was being most persuasive. "I know how it must look. I know I haven't explained things the way I should have. But everything I've been doing, Mom, every single piece of it, I've done because I'm trying to protect you." She said she was listening. "The farm is a lot to manage, more than you know, honestly. The maintenance costs, the liability, the upkeep on the hives alone. And the developer offer is real. It's significant. Enough that you would never have to worry about anything again. A place in a good community, people around you. No more winters out here alone." He leaned forward. "I just want you taken care of." Ruth thought about the brochure she had found on the kitchen counter, already filled in with her name. She thought about 11 signed documents she had not read. She thought about the prescription that made the afternoons slow. She said she appreciated his concern. Travis said he would like them to sit down together that evening and go over everything. The documents, the offer, all of it. Transparent, he said. No more confusion. She said that sounded fine. He smiled. The smile reached his eyes, which was more unsettling than if it had not. An hour later, Owen came through the back door with mud on his boots and a small brown notebook in his hand. He set it on the table between them after Travis had gone to make a phone call in the other room. It was Earl's bee notebook, the one from the hive barn. Owen had found it in the storage cabinet behind the smoker, in a space so narrow and unremarkable that no one who did not know to look would have thought to search it. The cover was worn at the corners. Earl's handwriting inside was precise and small, the handwriting of someone who treated information as something that deserved to be recorded correctly. The first 2/3 of the notebook were exactly what the cover suggested: dates, observations, which hives were producing and which were struggling, weather notes, seasonal patterns going back 12 years. The last third was something else. Dates, initials, short notes in the same precise hand. Ruth read through them slowly. December T called again, asking about county assessments. 3rd time this year. March T visited unannounced. Walked the east pasture twice with a man I did not recognize. Did not introduce him. July T asked about the will again, specifically about whether RW has signing authority over property transfers. I said yes. He asked if that could be changed. I said I did not see why it would need to be. September spoke with Alderman, beginning the process. T does not know. The entries continued through the following year, up to 3 weeks before Earl died. The last one read, "Still not told, RW." This was a mistake, I am not sure how to fix now. Call Owen. Owen had found the entry that corresponded to the voicemail. They sat together for a moment in the quiet kitchen. Owen said, quietly so Travis would not hear from the other room, I also looked into Dr. Hale. Ruth said she was listening. Owen set his phone on the table. He had pulled up a business registration record. Gregory Hale, Medical Practice, LLC, registered 8 months ago, listed under business address, a suite in a professional building in Copper Hill. Listed under registered agent, the person who had filed the incorporation paperwork, Travis Allen Whitfield. Travis had registered Dr. Hale's practice. Ruth looked at the screen for a long moment. Then she looked at Owen. He said, he didn't just find you a new doctor. She said she knew. He set one up, Owen said. He set up a practice, and then he recommended it to you. From the other room came the sound of Travis's voice on the phone, easy and assured, the voice of a man who believed he was still managing the situation. Ruth picked up the green journal from the counter where she had left it and moved it to the cabinet behind the coffee cups, behind the preserves she had been meaning to use since last winter, behind the place where Earl's notebook used to be. Then she went to the other room doorway and told Travis she was looking forward to their conversation this evening. He covered the phone and smiled at her. Me too, Mom, he said. We're going to get everything sorted out. She nodded and went back to the kitchen. Owen was watching her. She said, very quietly, we need an attorney, not alderman, someone who handles cases like this specifically. Owen was already looking at his phone. Travis asked to sit with her after dinner. Sienna went upstairs without being asked, which Ruth noticed. The departure was too well timed, too practiced, the exit of someone who had been told in advance to leave the room at a certain point. Owen stayed in the living room. Ruth could hear the quiet of him in there, the particular stillness of someone listening. She sat across from Travis at the kitchen table, the table where she had signed 11 documents in 12 weeks. She had thought about that while she made dinner, about how ordinary that table had looked each time. Travis put his hands on the table, palms down, the posture of someone choosing openness deliberately. Mom, he said, I think we need to clear the air. She said she was listening. I know I haven't handled this well. I know I should have talked to you more directly from the beginning, and I didn't, and that was wrong. He looked at her with the expression he had been practicing since she was 8 years old, and he had broken something he wanted her not to tell Earl about. I want to fix that now. She waited. The situation with the farm is complicated. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But I need you to understand something, and I need you to really hear it. He paused for what she recognized as calculated weight. Your name is on those documents, Mom. The company filings, the authorizations. You're listed as a corporate officer. Now, I know things happened in a way that wasn't ideal. I know the circumstances were difficult. But legally, those signatures are yours. And if anyone starts pulling on this thread, the questions won't just be for me. He let that sit. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying it because I love you, and I want you to understand the full picture before you make any decisions. Ruth looked at him. She had been prepared for this. She had understood, since reading the business registration for Dr. Hale's practice, that Travis would eventually try to use the documents as leverage. What she had not fully prepared for was how reasonable he would sound while doing it. That was the particular skill she had never given him enough credit for. He had learned it the same way he had learned everything useful, by watching what worked on people and filing it away. She said, "I appreciate you telling me that." Travis relaxed slightly. A small, involuntary movement. She said, "Is there something specific you would like me to do?" He said, "Yes, actually." He said the simplest thing, the cleanest thing for everyone involved was for the property transaction to proceed as planned. Once the deal closed, the company filings became irrelevant. Nobody would have any reason to look at them. Everything would resolve itself quietly. She said she would need some time to think about that. He said she could have until the end of the week. She heard the Friday deadline in that, the same deadline Sienna had spoken into the dark kitchen 3 nights ago. He was still running the same clock. Then Travis said something that told her he knew more than she had estimated. He said, "I also know you went to see James Alderman." Ruth did not move her hands. She did not look away. She said, "Yes, I did." Something shifted in Travis's face. She had not denied it. He had expected either a lie or a confession of ignorance. The direct acknowledgement was something he had not planned for. "He told you about the easement," Travis said. She said yes. Travis was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've filed a legal challenge, Mom. I want you to know that directly. I've questioned Dad's mental capacity at the time of signing. That's not something I did lightly." She said she had seen the document he left in the office. Another small pause. He had wanted that to surprise her. "You're going to be called as a witness," he said, "as someone who was with Dad in his final months. You're going to be asked what you observed about his memory, his reasoning, whether he seemed confused." She said she understood what he was asking. Was he confused, Mom? She looked at her son. She took her time. "Earl Whitfield," she said, drove to Knoxville on a Tuesday in September, met with an attorney, signed a legal instrument that has since been properly recorded in Knox County, drove home, helped me put up 14 jars of apple preserves, and made chicken soup for dinner." She kept her voice even. He was not confused. Travis looked at the table. "I think we're done for this evening," Ruth said. She stood up. He did not stop her. She crossed the kitchen and went to the hallway. And when she reached the bottom of the stairs, she found Owen sitting on the 3rd step, elbows on knees, looking at her. She said, "You heard." He said most of it. They went upstairs together. In the hallway outside her room, he showed her his phone. A message from one of the attorneys Mr. Alderman had recommended, a woman named Catherine Reeves, who handled elder financial exploitation cases in Knoxville. The message said she had reviewed the summary Owen had sent earlier that afternoon. She said she had availability tomorrow morning at 10. She said what they had described was the most documented case of its kind she had seen in 12 years of practice. She said she would like to meet. Ruth read the message twice. She handed the phone back to Owen. She said, 10 o'clock. Owen nodded. She went into her room. She sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and listened to the house. Downstairs, after a while, she heard Travis climb the stairs, heard his door close, heard the quiet settle back in. Earl had not been confused, and neither was she. Catherine Reeves had the kind of office that communicated something specific about the work she did. Not wealthy, not decorative, but organized in the way of someone who handles a great deal of paper and needs to find any piece of it in under 30 seconds. certificates on the walls, a whiteboard with case names. Ruth was careful not to read. She was younger than Ruth had expected, 50 perhaps, with the direct manner of someone who had spent years asking people to say the exact thing they meant and had little patience for approximation. She shook their hands and sat down. "I've reviewed what Owen sent last night," she said. "Let me tell you what I see. And then I want to say something before we go any further." She told them. The forensic signature analysis showed clear inconsistency with authenticated samples. The prescription records, combined with the pattern of signing timing, were consistent with facilitated signing under compromised cognition. The business registration linking Travis to Dr. Hale's practice was, in her opinion, the most significant single piece of evidence. Then she set her pen down. "Mrs. Whitfield, before you sign the engagement letter, I need you to understand how this is likely to unfold. Criminal charges against Travis are possible. The forgery evidence and the Dr. Hale situation give us a path, but criminal prosecutions require the district attorney's cooperation and carry a higher burden of proof than civil claims. Civil relief, protecting your assets and property, is significantly more certain than criminal conviction." She looked at Ruth directly. "I need you to be prepared for a version of this where Travis faces civil penalties, loses his professional reputation, and carries this legally for years, but does not go to prison." Ruth was quiet for a moment. "Is that enough for you?" Catherine asked. "I ask because I have had clients for whom it was not, and the disappointment damaged them. I would rather you know now." Ruth thought about the women she knew who had arrived at 68 carrying things they had never resolved. She thought about Doris Canfield in Sevier County, who had withdrawn and never known the threat against her was invented. She thought about what the word enough meant when the thing you were measuring was 46 years of love that had turned into something she still did not have a clean name for. She also thought about something simpler. She thought about Earl at his desk in September, driving to Knoxville, signing a document, coming home, not saying a word. Earl had not needed Travis to go to prison. Earl had needed the land to stay. That was what he had spent his last months protecting. Not punishment, protection. She said, "I want the record to exist. I want the next woman to be able to find it. If Travis goes to prison, that is a consequence of what he did. If he does not, the record still exists. That is enough." Catherine looked at her for a moment. Something settled in her expression. Then she said, "I need to tell you something about why this case matters to me personally." She told them about Sevier County, the widow named Doris Canfield, Sienna Cross, the client who withdrew because her son was frightened by a threat Travis invented. "I was not able to prove the intimidation." She said it without self-pity. "I have thought about Doris Canfield a great many times since. She withdrew, and whatever happened to her afterward, I do not know, and that sits with me. The reason I am still doing this work, specifically this kind of work, is cases like hers." She paused. "You are the first person to come to me on a Sienna Cross case who has not already withdrawn." Ruth said she had not known withdrawal was something people did. Catherine said most people didn't until they had already done it. Usually by then it was too late. Owen asked about the two tracks, civil and criminal. Catherine outlined both. Civil injunctive relief filed today. Property transactions frozen pending review. Criminal referral to the State Medical Board regarding Dr. Hale. And a referral to the district attorney regarding forgery, with the understanding that prosecution was not guaranteed. Sienna's cooperation, if secured through Catherine's negotiations, would significantly strengthen the picture. Owen asked how long. Catherine said months for civil resolution, longer for criminal if pursued. She said, "There will be days when you question whether this is worth the time and cost and disruption. That is normal. I want you to know it now rather than discover it later." Ruth said she understood. Then Catherine said there was one more thing. She slid a printed email across the desk. Travis's attorney had filed an emergency motion at 7 a.m. requesting a court-ordered deposition of Ruth as a material witness in the mental competency proceeding before the end of the week. Owen said, "He's trying to get her on record before she has representation." Catherine said exactly. If the motion was granted, Ruth would be compelled to appear and testify under oath by Friday. Any statement she made about Earl's final months could be used against the easement. Travis was running the same Friday deadline from a legal direction. Catherine said she could file a counter motion before end of day. She said she knew the judges. She set the engagement letter on the desk. Ruth picked up the pen. She signed her name clearly, exactly as she always signed it, and set the pen down. Catherine said she would begin filing immediately. Outside the window, Knoxville went about its Thursday. Ordinary traffic, ordinary sky, ordinary city, with no particular awareness of what had just been decided in one office on the 4th floor by one woman who had spent 18 months learning what it felt like to have her own name used against her, and who had just signed her name one more time. Her own name, her own decision, her own hand. She was done with the other kind. Catherine filed the counter motion at 8 a.m. and the injunction at 9. Ruth knew this because Catherine called her at 9:15. She said the motion to stay the deposition had been accepted for review and would be ruled on by end of day. She said the preliminary injunction, if granted, would freeze all property transactions involving Ruth's name or her assets pending the civil proceeding. She said it would likely be granted within the week. Ruth thanked her and ended the call and sat at the kitchen table in the quiet house. Owen was upstairs. Travis had not yet come down. Through the window, the orchard was losing the last of its color, gray-brown now, the apple trees stripped bare for winter. She had been a very patient woman for a very long time. She thought she could manage a few more days. Travis came downstairs at 10. He poured coffee. He did not look at her when he poured it. That alone was telling. Travis always looked at the room he entered. It was a habit of management. His phone rang. He answered it, listened for a moment, and walked out to the back porch. Through the window, Ruth could see his posture change as he stood there, the particular change of someone receiving information they had been hoping would not arrive. He came back inside 5 minutes later. He set his phone on the counter. He did not pick up his coffee. He stood for a moment, looking at nothing in particular, and then he turned to Ruth, and something in his expression was different from anything she had seen in 11 months. The reasonable man was gone. What remained was the person underneath. "You hired an attorney," he said. She said she had. He said, "Catherine Reeves." She said yes. He said, the injunction, she said yes. Travis pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. He did not do it the way he had done it every evening for 11 months, thoughtfully, with the body language of someone managing a situation. He did it the way you sit down when you are done managing. "Mom," he said, "this is a mistake." She said she did not think so. "You're going to spend the next 2 years of your life in legal proceedings. You're going to spend money you don't have on attorneys. And at the end of it, you're going to be alone on this farm with a piece of paper that says you own 85 acres that cost more to maintain every year than they produce. Is that what you want?" She said she wanted the farm. "The farm," Travis said, and his voice had something in it now that she had not heard there before, something that had been waiting behind all the reasonable conversations and the careful words. "Mom, Dad was not right the last year. I know you don't want to hear that, but he wasn't thinking clearly. He made decisions from sentiment because he had always done that, and sentiment is not a strategy. He was going to let this land sit untouched until it needed a new roof and a new barn and a new everything. And then what? What was the plan?" she said. He drove to Knoxville on a Tuesday in September. He signed a legal document. He came home and helped me put up 14 jars of apple preserves and made chicken soup for dinner. "Tell me again what confusion looks like." Travis looked at her for a long moment. "He kept secrets from you," Travis said. "That's not clarity. That's a man who didn't trust his own wife with the full picture." Owen appeared in the doorway. He had come downstairs quietly. He stood there and did not say anything immediately. He looked at his brother the way an engineer looks at a structure he is assessing for load. Then he said, "Dad didn't trust her with it because he was protecting her from having to make a choice about you. That's not confusion. That's the opposite of confusion." Travis looked at Owen. Whatever he had been about to say next, he did not say it. "I think you should leave today," Owen said. Not loudly, simply. Travis stood. He looked between them. For a moment, something moved across his face that Ruth thought might have been grief, genuine and unperformed, the first real thing she had seen from him in a very long time. Then it passed. He said he would pack his things. He went upstairs. Ruth and Owen sat at the kitchen table and listened to the sound of him moving around above them. Neither of them spoke. After a while, they heard his bag come down the stairs and the back door open, and his truck start in the drive. They listened until the sound of it faded out down the road. The house was very quiet. Outside, the bare orchard stood in the gray November light. Earl had planted those trees. 3 generations of Whitfields had worked that land. Travis had looked at it his whole life and seen an asset waiting to be liquidated. Owen said, "He'll file something else." She said she knew. "Catherine will handle it." She said she knew that, too. Then she heard a sound in the hallway. Quiet. Deliberate. She turned. Sienna Cross stood in the kitchen doorway. She had not left with Travis. She was still dressed as though she had been planning to, bags presumably upstairs, but she had stopped. She stood with her hands at her sides, and her expression arranged in a way that Ruth had not seen before, not composed, not calculating, something closer to exhausted. She said, "Mrs. Whitfield, there is something I think you should know about what Travis did to his father. Before any of this, 3 years ago," she paused. "I can tell you because I was there. And I think you need to know what he is actually capable of, so that your attorneys are prepared for how far he will go." Ruth looked at Sienna Cross for a long moment. Then she said, "Sit down." Sienna sat across from Ruth at the kitchen table. Owen remained in the doorway, not sitting, not leaving, present for whatever came next. Sienna set her hands flat on the table, the gesture of someone choosing transparency. And Ruth recognized it because she had seen Travis make the same gesture on the evening he called it clearing the air. She filed that away. "I want to be clear about something first," Sienna said. "I am not doing this because I feel bad. I know what I did, and I know what it cost you, and I am not pretending otherwise. I am doing this because Travis drove away without a second look, because Catherine Reeves has a file on me from Sevier County, and because I am not willing to go to prison for a man who just walked out that door." Ruth said she appreciated the honesty. Sienna said, 3 years before Earl died, Travis came to me with a problem. He had gotten into debt, the kind that compounds. He needed a large sum very quickly, and he had already exhausted what he could borrow legitimately. She paused. He had forged his father's signature on a loan guarantee, $180,000. The lender had begun asking questions. Ruth did not move. "Earl found out," Sienna said. "I don't know how. Travis said his father showed him the documents and asked him directly. Earl paid it off, all of it, out of the farm accounts. And he told Travis 2 things, that he would never speak of it publicly, and that Travis was never to come near the farm again while he was alive." Owen said, very quietly, from the doorway, "That was the year Dad and Travis stopped talking." Sienna looked at him. "Yes?" Ruth thought about Earl at the kitchen table that night, sitting across from his son with the documents between them. She thought about what it cost a man like Earl to pay that debt quietly, and the careful, distant way he had watched Travis at family gatherings in the years after. She thought about the warning he had given Owen. If Travis ever comes around talking money, come home. Don't wait. Earl had not feared the future. He had feared what he already knew Travis was capable of, and he had protected her from it because he did not want her to have to choose. Sienna continued. "Travis came back after Earl died because he saw the property valuations and decided the risk was acceptable. He used me because I know how to move this kind of transaction." She said it flatly. "What I did not know when I agreed was what he had done in Sevier County." Ruth said she would like to hear about Sevier County. Sienna said, "The woman's name was Doris Canfield, 74. Her husband had died 8 months before we approached her. Travis handled the family side. I handled the property side. When she hired an attorney and the case looked like it would proceed, Travis called her son." She paused. "He told the son that if the investigation went forward, questions about how the estate had been managed might come out, questions that could affect other inheritances. He implied Doris had been making decisions against the family's interest." Sienna looked at the table. It was a fabricated threat. There was nothing to find. But the son believed it, convinced his mother to withdraw, and I let it happen. The kitchen was quiet. Ruth thought about Doris Canfield, who had withdrawn and never known the threat against her was invented, and who had probably spent the years since wondering what she had done wrong. She asked Sienna what she wanted in return. Sienna said, "I want your attorney to know I will cooperate. Testimony about Travis's role in both situations. what I know about the loan forgery, the medication arrangement with Dr. Hale." She paused, and the pause was deliberate. "But I am not going to give you everything tonight at your kitchen table with nothing in writing. I have done this work for 11 years. I know what my information is worth, and it loses its value the moment I hand it over for free." Ruth asked what she was holding back. "One piece," Sienna said. "The piece that turns this from a civil matter into something a prosecutor cannot ignore. I will give it to your attorney, in a room, with an agreement on the table, not before." She met Ruth's eyes without apology. "If I gave it away now, I would have nothing left to trade. A woman in my position does not survive by giving things away." Ruth looked at her for a long moment. She found, to her own surprise, that she did not entirely disrespect the logic. It was the logic of someone who had spent a long time being the disposable one in other people's plans and had learned to hold something back. She asked the one question that had been sitting in her since October. She asked whether Travis had deleted the voicemail his father left on Owen's phone in the weeks before Earl died. Sienna considered whether that one cost her anything. Then she said yes. Travis had told her about it himself, early on, the kind of detail a man shares when he is proud of his own thoroughness. He had borrowed the phone, found the message, and removed it. He had called it housekeeping. Sienna said the word the way you set down something distasteful, so it had not been accidental. Ruth had suspected as much. Hearing it confirmed, closed a door she had left slightly open, the one behind which she had still allowed for the possibility that her son was not quite the person the evidence kept insisting he was. That possibility was gone now. She let it go. Ruth said she was not in a position to make any decision about cooperation. Her attorney would determine what was possible. Sienna said that was exactly who she wanted to be talking to. She stood and picked up the small bag she had left in the front hall before coming to the kitchen. She had known she was staying before Travis ever drove away. At the door, she said, without turning, "For what it is worth, your husband built something difficult to undo. I have never seen a conservation instrument filed as carefully. He knew exactly what he was doing." Ruth said he had. Sienna left. Owen came and sat across from Ruth. They sat in the quiet a moment. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. A Knoxville number. Neither of them recognized it. He answered. He listened for a moment. Then he held the phone toward Ruth. "It's the developer's attorney," he said. "He's asking to speak with you directly." Ruth took the phone. The man on the other end introduced himself as Gerald Holt, attorney for Bennett Development Group. His voice was professional and careful, the voice of someone trained to communicate precisely without communicating more than necessary. He said he was calling because his firm had received a preliminary injunction notice related to property associated with Ruth Anne Whitfield of Copper Hill, Tennessee. Ruth said yes. He said he needed to understand her position directly. She said she would appreciate that. He said he would be straightforward with her. His firm had been told by Travis Whitfield, acting under what he claimed was a power of attorney, that a transaction was being arranged with her knowledge and full consent. His firm had also been told that the conservation easement on the eastern parcel was a procedural matter that would resolve in their favor. Then he said, "Mrs. Whitfield, I want to share something that I am not technically required to tell you. When I spoke with Travis Whitfield initially, I asked a standard question about why the property owner was not present to discuss the transaction. The answer he gave me was that you found these matters too complicated to follow. I have heard variations of that answer before in my work. A pause. I did not find it credible. I found it convenient. Ruth said she appreciated him saying so. He said, I need to ask you directly, did you authorize any transaction regarding your property? Ruth said, I did not. The clarity of it surprised her even as she said it. Not the words, but the ease of them. For 18 months, she had been navigating around things, performing around things, managing what she revealed and when. Speaking plainly to a stranger about what she had and had not authorized felt like setting down something heavy she had been carrying long enough to forget it had weight. He said, Were you aware of the proposed development arrangement? She said she had only recently become aware of it, and that she had retained legal counsel. She gave him Catherine Reeves's contact information and said she would prefer all further communications go through Catherine's office. He said, Of course. Then he asked one more question. He said, Are you aware of whether any funds have been transferred into accounts associated with your property, Travis Whitfield's representation? To us last week stated that an earnest money deposit of $130,000 had been placed in a farm operating account as confirmation of the arrangement. Ruth said she was not aware of any such transfer. A brief pause. Not cold. Something more like a man absorbing information and deciding what it meant. He said his firm would contact her attorney immediately. He thanked her and ended the call with the brisk courtesy of someone who had gotten what he needed and had a great deal more to do before end of day. Ruth handed the phone back to Owen. She said, Travis moved money into the farm account. Owen was already at the laptop Catherine had given them access to. He found the account. He was quiet for a moment. It is here, he said. $130,000, 4 days ago, labeled as a holding deposit for property transaction. 4 days ago was the day after Travis read Earl's emails on the laptop. He had accepted the developer's earnest money, knowing the transaction was legally impossible, and deposited it into an account he had authority over. Owen called Catherine. He told her the amount and the date and the description. Catherine said she needed to file additional documents tonight. She said what Travis had done by accepting that money while knowing the transaction could not legally proceed was potentially criminal, and she wanted to move quickly. She said, Ruth, are you prepared for this to move faster than we expected? Ruth said she ended the call. Owen made coffee. Ruth sat at the kitchen table in the house she had lived in for 41 years. Through the window the farm was dark, the barn and hive barn and orchard going to shadow in the November evening. She thought about Earl sitting at this same table, carrying the things he could not say to her. She thought about all the years they had sat in this kitchen together, and what had been present in the room, and what had been kept carefully outside of it. She thought about what it meant that she was sitting here now, having done something about it. Not because she was braver than he was, because she had not been given the option of being quiet. And she had learned, somewhere in the past several months, that the option of being quiet was not always the protection it appeared to be. Owen set a cup in front of her and sat down. They sat together without needing to say much, which was what she had been missing most since Earl died. Not words, just someone there. Then her own phone rang. Nashville area code. Unknown number. She answered. "Mom," Travis's voice, steadier than she expected. "I know you talked to the developer's attorney." She said yes, she had. A silence. Then he said, "I need you to know something about Sienna. Whatever she told you, she was not a bystander in Sevier County. She ran that operation. I handled documents for my own situation here, but Sevier County was entirely hers. I am not saying that to excuse myself. I am saying it because she is going to protect herself first. That is what she does." Ruth waited. Then Travis said, "There is also something else." His voice changed slightly, the way it had changed once, briefly, when Owen told him to leave. "I took something from Dad's desk the night I read the emails. A letter he had written. I should not have taken it. It was not mine to take." Ruth was very still. "What kind of letter?" she said. "The kind you write," Travis said, "when you know you are running out of time." Travis arrived at the back door at 8, alone. No truck in the drive. He carried a small cream envelope with his name on the front in Earl's handwriting. She opened the door and stepped back. Owen was in the kitchen. He looked at his brother and said nothing. Travis sat down the way he had sat every evening for 11 months, except the ease was gone. He set the envelope on the table. He said he had found it in the center desk drawer the night he read the emails. He should not have taken it. He had been afraid of what it said and thought knowing might give him some advantage, which was exactly the kind of thinking that had gotten him here. Ruth looked at the envelope. She asked whether he had read it. He said he had started to. He read the first paragraph and stopped. Not because he found something useful. He stopped because it was the first paragraph of a letter a man writes to his wife when he knows he is running out of time. And Travis understood, reading it, that he had not been any part of what that man wanted to say. The kitchen was quiet for a moment. Then Travis said, "There is something else I want to tell you before I leave. I am not saying this because it is required, and I am not saying it to make myself feel better." Ruth waited. "From the first week I arrived," Travis said, "I knew you were not confused. I have been telling that story for years because it was easier. And when I came here, I kept telling it because it was useful." He looked at the envelope, not at Ruth. "But I knew. I want you to know that I knew." Ruth said, "I know you knew." He looked at her then. She said, "You are Earl's son. He was not capable of not knowing things. Neither are you." Something moved across Travis's face, older and more specific than the grief she had seen when Owen told him to leave. Owen spoke for the first time. "What are you going to do?" Travis said he was going to contact Catherine Reeves today and cooperate fully. He said it was the only remaining choice with any integrity in it, and he intended to find out if he still had enough to make one. He stood. He asked if Ruth wanted him to leave the property today. Ruth said she would need to think about that. He nodded. He went to the door. He stopped there for a moment with his hand on the frame, the green-painted frame that Earl had repainted every spring for 38 years. He looked at the kitchen once before he went. Not at Ruth, at the room itself, the table, the counter, the window with a view of the orchard. The way you look at something you know you are not coming back to. Then he went outside. She and Owen listened to the sound of him crossing the yard. Then Ruth picked up the envelope, Earl's handwriting on the front, slightly more deliberate than usual. the way he wrote when he was being careful. She opened it. The paper inside was one page, written on both sides in his hand. She sat down. She read it. He had written about the farm first, the way he always led with the practical things. He had written that he had made arrangements, that there were some things he had not yet told her but intended to, and that he kept putting it off in the way he put things off when he did not know how to begin them. He had written, "I want you to know that I have trusted you with this house and this land and this life for 41 years, and I would trust you with it for 41 more if I had them. Whatever happens with the boys, whatever happens with the farm, you are the right person to be standing on that land." He had written about Travis, only a few lines, but they were there, and Ruth read them twice. "I have to tell you something about our older son that I should have told you 3 years ago. He took money using my name, a great deal of it, and when I confronted him, he did not deny it. I paid what was owed and kept it quiet because I did not want you to carry it, and because some part of me still hoped he would become a man who regretted it. I was wrong to keep it from you. If he comes back to this farm, do not believe the man who left is the man who returns. Watch what he does, not what he says. He is very good at what he says." Ruth lowered the page for a moment. There it was, in Earl's own hand, written before he died. Not Sienna's account, not a story from a woman trying to save herself. Earl had known exactly what Travis had done with his signature, had set it down on paper, and had been trying to warn her even then. She read on. He had written, "There is something else I want to say, and I am going to say it plainly, because I have not been plain enough about it. You are the most capable person I have ever known. I have said that to the attorney in Knoxville. I have said it at the bank." Ruth set the letter on the table. He had told James Alderman. He had told the woman at the bank counter. He had driven to Knoxville and said it to a stranger. And he had come home and helped her put up 14 jars of apple preserves and not said a word of it to her. She understood why, reading it now. If he said it to her, he would have to change. And Earl changed the way he changed everything on this farm, slowly, on his own timeline, when he was ready. He had run out of time first. I have thought it every day of our marriage. I should have said it to you 10,000 times, and I only found the words when I sat down to write them. And now here they are. The last line was simply, "You always could, Ruth Anne." And below it, signed the way he signed everything when formalities seemed beside the point, E. Ruth sat at the kitchen table with the letter in her hands. Outside, the November farm was gray and still. Owen did not say anything. He understood, as his father had, when silence was the right thing. She sat there for a long time. The legal matters resolved over the following months. The mental competency challenge was dismissed. Earl's clarity at signing demonstrated through his emails to Mr. Alderman, the appointment he had kept, and the 14 jars of apple preserves Ruth had photographed and dated in her green journal that same afternoon. Dr. Hale lost his license. Travis did not go to prison. Catherine had told Ruth this was possible, and it was. He faced civil liability, a judgment, years of financial consequence. He and Ruth did not speak in those months. It was not a decision either of them announced. It simply became true. Sienna Cross reached a cooperation agreement with the district attorney. Her testimony against Travis and her account of the Sevier County matter were valuable enough that she avoided the criminal charges Catherine had thought possible, though her real estate license was revoked in 2 states, and the record of both cases now followed her name. Ruth chose not to follow the details of where Sienna went afterward. She had decided some time ago that the woman was not worth the hours of her attention, and she held to that decision. On the days when Ruth thought about Travis, she thought about something small. The one afternoon Earl had let him help with the hives when Travis was 9. Travis had been so frightened of the bees that he pressed himself flat against the barn wall and could not move. Earl had not pushed him. He had simply said, "Give it time," and kept working. Travis never went back. She thought about that afternoon now, filed it with the other things about her son she did not know what to do with, and moved on. The farm was entirely Ruth's. The east pasture remained untouched. By April, Owen had moved back. He was there in the mornings, drinking his coffee, asking her opinion about things. Not the same as Earl. Nothing was the same. But there was a shape to the mornings again. One Saturday in April, Ruth walked out to the east pasture for the first time since everything ended. The air was clean and soft, the orchard beginning to show color at the branch tips. She walked the fence line the way Earl had walked it every spring, found one post that needed resetting, and made a note. When she reached the east pasture, she stopped. The creek was running well. The timber on the far bank was leafing out. The 40 acres she had spent a year fighting to keep were exactly what they had always been. Ordinary, good, hers. She sat down near the creek. She had not planned to, but her legs decided, and she followed. The crying came slowly, the way things come when you have held them off long enough that they arrive with a patience of their own. She did not cry about the farm, or the legal proceedings, or the months of fighting. She cried about specific things, about the morning Earl had come in from the hives and set a small jar of new honey on the windowsill without a word, placed where the light would catch the color, and moved on to something else. About the way he passed the salt before she asked. About the coffee cup waiting that first winter morning she was late getting downstairs, already prepared the way he prepared it, strong with just enough sugar to take the edge off. Small things, the currency of 41 years. She had not had time to sit with any of them. October had been consumed by evidence and attorneys and fear. November by consequence and resolution. And somewhere in all of it, the ordinary grief of losing a person she had loved for most of her adult life had been waiting at the door, like a patient caller she kept saying she would get to later. She got to it now. At some point, the crying stopped, the way it does when it has done what it came to do. She stayed a little longer. What she understood, sitting there, was what had been permanently consumed. Not the farm, which she had kept. Not the truth about Travis, which she had found. The thing that was gone was that first year, the year she should have spent simply missing him. That time had been taken, and there was no remedy for it. She sat by the creek and let that be true. Then she stood, brushed off her jeans, and walked back through the pasture toward the house. She stopped once near the old fence line at a place where the soil was deep and good, and made a note about that too. Owen was in the kitchen when she came in. 2 cups on the counter, the blue one of Earl's beside the ordinary one Owen used. She understood he had put it there without overthinking it. She said, "I am going to plant a tree in the east pasture, near the creek." He said, "What kind?" She said, "An apple tree." The soil ran deep near the fence line. She did not know if it would take. Owen said, "Give it 3 years." She looked at him. He said, "Dad always said, give it 3 years." She poured her coffee and stood at the window. On the counter beside the cookbooks sat 3 jars from the first batch of Earl's Gold, waiting to be labeled. Owen had held up the first jar when it was done and looked at the color in the kitchen light, the way Earl used to check the clarity. Neither of them said anything. It did not need saying. She thought about Doris Canfield in Sevier County. She had written her a letter in January explaining who she was and what had happened, and that a record now existed. She had not asked for anything. She had wanted Doris to know that someone had finished what they both started. Doris had written back in February, 3 lines on a note card. "Thank you. I'm glad you did not stop. I wish I had not." Ruth kept it in the green journal beside Earl's letter. She drank her coffee. The farm went about its spring business. The orchard was waking. The bees were working. The east pasture held its ground. The creek ran where it always ran. It was enough. It was, in fact, more than enough. In October, Ruth walked out to check on the apple tree. She had planted it in late April, in the spot near the fence line where the soil ran deep. Technically wrong for apples, too much clay toward the creek, but she had chosen it anyway, for reasons that had more to do with Earl than horticulture. The tree had survived the summer. She had not been certain it would. Small and young, the trunk the diameter of her wrist, the leaves gone to fall colors. It would need years before it produced anything. Earl's first apple tree had taken 4 years. She stood beside it for a while and made a note in the green journal, the date, the height, the condition, small things that add up to something over time. Then she walked back toward the house, and her phone rang. A Tennessee area code, not Nashville or Knoxville. She answered. The voice was a woman's, older, with the cadence of someone who had rehearsed what she was going to say and was not certain she would get through it. "Is this Ruth Whitfield?" She said it was. "This is Doris Canfield in Sevier County. I got your letter in January. I have been meaning to call since August, and I kept not doing it, and I decided I was going to stop not doing it." Ruth sat down on the porch step. She said she was very glad Doris had called. Doris said she had gone back to an attorney the previous month about her situation. Some of it was too far gone to address, but some of it was not, and she had been able to use the documentation that now existed to establish what had happened. She had not recovered everything. Recovering some of it had surprised her by mattering more than she expected. Ruth said she was glad. Doris was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I wanted to ask you something. When you were in the middle of it, were you afraid?" Ruth thought about that honestly. She said yes. For a long time she was afraid, and then at some point she was too tired to be afraid, and she kept moving, not because the fear went away, but because she had things to do and the fear was in the way. She said she did not know if that was courage. It might just have been stubbornness. Doris made a sound that might have been a laugh. She said Earl sounded stubborn too, from the letter. Ruth said he was. the good kind. They talked for a while longer, not about legal matters, about their farms, the different ways they had come to be alone on them, the quality of October light in the eastern Tennessee hills. When Doris said she should let Ruth go, Ruth said she was not in a hurry. After they hung up, Ruth sat on the porch step a few more minutes. The orchard was showing its fall colors, gold and rust in the afternoon light, the hive barn quiet behind it. She thought about something. Earl had never known Doris Canfield. He had never known about Sienna Cross or Sevier County, or the woman who had been too frightened to finish what she started. He had simply fixed what he saw needed fixing, in the quiet way he fixed everything, and gone home and helped put up preserves and not mentioned it. And now, because of what he did, Doris Canfield had gone back to an attorney in October and recovered something she had believed was gone. That was what Earl had left behind. Not just the farm, not just the conservation easement recorded in Knox County on the 3rd of October, 1 week before he died. He had left a set of consequences that ran further than he knew, through people he had never met, because the things he built were solid, and the things he protected were real. Ruth went inside. Owen was in the kitchen. He looked up when she came in. She said, "Doris Canfield called." He said, "How is she?" She said, "Better, doing better." He nodded and went back to his reading. Ruth put the kettle on. While she waited, she stood at the window. The farm in October, the east pasture visible at the edge of the view, and somewhere in it the small apple tree she could not see from this distance, but knew was there. There are things you do not understand about a life until you have had to fight for it. I am not a brave person. I want you to know that before I say anything else. I was afraid for most of the 18 months I have told you about. Afraid and moving anyway. Not because the fear left, but because Earl had built something worth protecting, and I could not let it go without trying. Earl left me a farm, a conservation easement, a brown notebook full of dates and names, a letter I almost never found. But the most important thing he left me was proof that someone had been paying attention to my life even when I had not been paying enough attention to it myself. If you have someone like that, I hope you know it today. And if you do not, I want to tell you what I learned at 68 years old, signing my name on a document I had actually read. You can be that person for yourself. You can start paying attention. You can write things down. You can ask the questions you have been waiting for permission to ask. It is never too late to understand what you own and protect what you have built. If something in this story touched you, I would like to hear from you. Leave your story below, wherever you are watching from. Your words might be the thing that helps someone else stop not doing it. The kettle was ready. Ruth poured her coffee and carried it to the kitchen table and sat down in the autumn house where she had lived for 41 years, in the valley below the Blue Ridge, on land that was hers. It was Tuesday, an ordinary one, the best kind there is.